Ukrainian army is seizing the initiative and trying to force the Russians to play by its rules. This was stated by the Commander-in-Chief of the Armed Forces of Ukraine, Oleksandr Syrskyi. He noted that in February, the defense forces regained control over a larger area of Ukrainian land than Russian troops managed to capture during the same period. This is the first time since the Kursk offensive operation in 2024. Syrskyi emphasized that the enemy outnumbers them by almost 3 times, but due to the active actions of the Ukrainian armed forces, Russian commanders are forced to postpone the dates of their operations and patch up holes in their own defenses.
We are continuing the counteroffensive operation in the Oleksandrivka direction. Here, the airborne assault group regained control over 285 square kilometers in a month. Overall, since the beginning of the operation, control has been restored over more than 400 square kilometers of territory. At the same time, in many other directions, our soldiers are holding back the enemy through active defense and sometimes advancing forward. Oleksandr Syrskyi, Commander-in-Chief of the Armed Forces of Ukraine.
Analysts say that the defense forces are also disrupting the plans of Russian commanders in the Pokrovsk direction. For the second year in a row, the enemy has been trying to capture Pokrovsk and Myrnihart in order to later move their forces to Kostiantynivka, Drushkivka, as well as Kramatorsk and Slavyansk. And at the same time, they're trying to maintain the pace of assaults in the south of the Zaporizhia region.
All their deadlines have basically been crossed out by our defenders. So they're carrying out these operations in parallel. But at the same time, they just don't have enough forces. Their reserves aren't what they'd like them to be. They're redeploying troops, including from around Pokrovsk.
Since the beginning of the day, the Russian army has tried 47 times to break through Ukrainian defenses at 8 different bridgeheads. According to the Ukrainian General Staff, on the Huliaypole section of the front, the invaders attacked 13 times. Another 12 Russian assaults were repelled by the defense forces in the Pokrovsk direction. And on the Kostiantynivka bridgehead, Ukrainian defenders stopped 10 enemy attacks.
Right now, there are about 717,000 personnel from various security forces. Yeah, including the Army, the National Guard, and the FSB. So there are people in uniform present on the territory of Ukraine. They intend to increase their contingent to 800,000 by the end of the year. That's why their main resource is manpower. Plus, of course, there's the active use of drones, air support, and guided aerial bombs. They use up to 300 aerial bombs every day on various positions of the Ukrainian army. And on the frontline territories, the border areas, and along the front line.
And in occupied Crimea, Special Operations Forces struck 4 Russian radar stations. They clarified that they managed to destroy the Oborona 14 radar, the Nebo-U, and 2 stations inside the radar dome in occupied Yevpatoria. In the past 24 hours alone, Ukrainian defenders hit 3 tanks, 10 armored fighting vehicles, around 70 artillery systems, and 2 Russian multiple rocket launchers at various points along the front. The occupying forces will also be short 2,000 drones and nearly 200 vehicles. Also, according to the General Staff of the Armed Forces of Ukraine, 750 Russian soldiers were eliminated. And Russia's total combat losses since the start of the full-scale invasion have already exceeded 1,274,000 people.
And we'll discuss everything happening at the front and beyond with our guest Ihor Oleksandrovich Romanenko, founder of the Close the Sky Over Ukraine Charitable Foundation, and Lieutenant General, who is joining us live. Ihor Oleksandrovich, good morning and glory to Ukraine.
Hello, and a very warm welcome to everyone.
Glory to the heroes. Greetings to you and to our viewers.
Well, we can see that right now. The focus of attention has somewhat shifted to the situation in the Huliaypole direction. We talked about some of the successes that Ukraine's defense forces have achieved there. If we talk about what the situation is today, on the 2,476th day since the start of Russia's full-scale invasion of Ukraine, and, well, as I understand it, now we're already talking about what might be a rather abstract concept, but still the beginning of the spring-summer campaign. Maybe some elements of it are already being set in motion right now.
And this, which will determine what the coming months on the front will actually look like. Yeah. It is quite obvious that the enemy's actively attempting to execute their plans. which are constantly shifting in terms of dates and deadlines, and are being implemented exactly in the manner they see fit and want to. And this is largely due to the significant fact that in the Zaporizhia region, even north of Huliaypole, as well as in the Oleksandrivka direction in Dnipropetrovsk, despite a variety of specific challenges and difficulties we have with mobilization and logistical support for Ukraine's defense forces, our units and divisions are still successfully finding ways to execute and maintain counterattacks. In other words, these are the essential elements of the strategy of active and dynamic defense that Commander-in-Chief Syrskyi talked about more than a month ago. And this is indeed happening. So, in several directions, yes, actions like these are taking place. Naturally, the enemy is forced to respond to this. So, those concerns and their announcements about the spring-summer offensive campaign, so far, their plans to finish what they've been working on for months or even years are not being realized. Of course, progress is being made, in particular in places like Pokrovsk. It's already been 2 years in the entire Pokrovsk-Myrnograd agglomeration. They still haven't been able to accomplish their objectives. Our forces in Haishin and Rodensky are actively engaged in heavy combat operations there, continuing to fight and preventing the enemy from successfully carrying out their strategic military plans. Although, once again, they are partially redeploying troops from this area to places where they believe they need to significantly intensify and bolster military operations, including from the perspective of strengthening those specific directions. And now, in the Zaporizhia region, north of Huliaypole, the situation is developing. That's how they're responding.
There is a particularly interesting and concerning point that I would really like to discuss with you today. In Russia, right now, amid the ongoing and serious problems with replenishing personnel in the Russian military, they've started actively recruiting young university students. So to speak, they are now letting these students make up for their various academic shortcomings by signing official contracts to serve with the drone forces. But there are loopholes that can easily turn a potential UAV operator into an assault trooper. In other words, into cannon fodder for assault operations. How effective are these kinds of measures right now for Russia to replenish its forces? After all, as we have all come to realize over the course of the last several months, the number of Russians killed on the battlefield has exceeded their ability to recruit new personnel for the military forces.
This excess of losses over the supply of servicemen has been a positive trend for the Ukrainian defense forces since December of last year. So it's already been 3 months. This is an important trend, so to speak, that reflects a shortage of military personnel. Here, by and large, their plans for offensive operations are highly questionable. Where and how are they supposed to get the troops? One of the primary approaches we are seeing is that, well, when we take into consideration the current global trends where drones are increasingly being viewed as a top priority in every single domain, air, land, sea, and even underwater. That's why there's a campaign being carried out. And to encourage students, they're being pressured in terms of outstanding academic requirements and other things. That's how they're trying to solve these issues. At first, it's very important for them to start by promoting and steering people in the right direction. They're specifically encouraging them to become drone operators. That is to say, it is generally considered to be a significantly safer option. Although lately, there has been a major strategic shift in the overall approach. Everyone now recognizes the vital importance of using these types of drones. And as a result, there are even highly specialized military units being formed specifically to actively track down, target, and completely destroy the precise locations of drone operators. Furthermore, it is important to recognize that this situation is also becoming increasingly dangerous. In one way or another, by any means necessary, this is exactly how they are currently trying to recruit more soldiers. And from being a drone operator to becoming an assault trooper, it's a short step for them. They've shown time and again that they act without fear or hesitation. When necessary, they drop everything and go all in. We've actually seen, for anyone who might be interested, footage of people crawling forward, some on crutches, some without, because there are blocking units positioned behind them that deal very quickly with anyone who doesn't carry out their specific orders at that exact moment. So that's really the situation right now. And up until this point, there's been no definitive or clear-cut decision for Putin on exactly how to restock the military ranks with new soldiers. There's only the fear of a general mobilization, because after 5 years, it's really hard to keep calling this a special operation and not a war. This problem is slowly but surely getting worse for them. And because of this, they're coming up with all sorts of tactics, including the one we're discussing here with the students.
Igor Alexandrovich, there's another question I'd like to discuss with you. It is frequently observed and often said that, in essence, the front is present everywhere in our modern world now, especially when it comes to the brutal and relentless attacks carried out by the Russian Terrorist Federation, including those specifically targeting Ukraine's civilian population and essential critical infrastructure systems. And in this regard, I'd like to touch on the issue of air defense, because just at the end of last week, the European Commissioner for Defense and Space, Andrius Kubilius, once again mentioned that he is currently on a sort of missile tour and, as part of it, is trying to gather the necessary amount for the protection of both Europe and to form a defense for Ukraine. And he said that there are certain priorities for Ukraine as well. But given what is happening right now in the Middle East, how do you see the issues of air defense in Ukraine in the near future, and also over the European Union, including the member states of the alliance?
Unfortunately, people have gradually become somewhat accustomed to Ukraine, the continuous and brutal hostilities, the needs that exist and aren't being met quickly or on a large scale, which could actually lead to stopping the fighting with the help of our allies, especially the United States. Now we see this new, in a way, Iranian war, and it's making a significant number of things much more apparent for them, exposing vulnerabilities, and they're becoming more sensitive to these issues. And this is especially true for the American people. And here, activities like those carried out by Kubilius are picking up steam. What I would like to point out is that, for example, since yesterday, as we are all well aware of by now, the president mentioned it, drone specialists and fighter jet specialists have been in the process of being deployed. And I think they've already reached Jordan, where there is an American radar station that has been specifically targeted by hostile forces. This is an anti-ballistic missile system. This station alone, the whole station costs $500 million. The entire sophisticated system costs about $1.5 billion, and it's specifically designed to intercept targets at very high trajectories. And here's the significant trend we're seeing in modern warfare today. These large, expensive systems designed to destroy weapons like ballistic missiles of various different types. In general, missiles, especially the ballistic ones, turn out to be completely unprotected against, well, Shaheds or other unmanned strike drones, which are, let's say, many orders of magnitude cheaper than the systems themselves. And this doesn't just apply to the Americans. In Europe, only the air defense missile system located in Germany can operate against the Oreshnik. The Arrow 3 is an Israeli system, but the Russians have already put it to the test with their specialized surveillance drones, meaning they know where it's located, what it is, and how it works. This is quite gelid, but in Europe, this is still at the level of Russian reconnaissance, where basically only the French are actually using their base for nuclear submarines, meaning they used weapons there, drove them off, or partially destroyed them, and the rest is at the country level, at the level of investigations. This confirms the circumstances that they flew around, that they suspended the operation of civilian airports, and so on. That's it. So this is a calmer issue in terms of conducting military operations in Europe. But when it comes to the various ongoing conflicts around Iran, the different nations and regional powers involved, from this perspective, it's all extraordinarily complex and multifaceted. And for example, this is also clearly confirmed by the specific figure the president recently mentioned, that 11 different countries have now officially requested anti-drone assistance. But so far, only officially, Jordan, just in case, specifically to protect its sovereign territory, has received a very powerful and advanced American anti-ballistic missile defense system to ensure its safety. This highlights the growing regional demand for such sophisticated military technology. And the other 11, that's a significant number. Of course, it's pretty difficult to help everyone during wartime, but we really need these kinds of missile defense systems. But from this perspective, we don't even have anything with a limited range. That is, the latest Patriot packed 3 systems with MSE missiles, which can intercept Russian ballistic missiles. That's the situation.